Alright, so hello and welcome. Today we're going to go over castle designs, okay, in D&D, but this is more just overall. This isn't us, maybe a continuing series, honestly, because there's a lot of different designs you can do. I'm just going to show you this one, and this is my first attempt at a castle anyway in this scale. So that's what we'll go with. We'll go over all the floor lines because there's 4 floors technically and a basement. And I'll go over every aspect of it. And then I'll leave in the timestamps below when you can go skip to for whatever parts you need for it. Okay, and I'd appreciate a like for that. Okay. Otherwise, before we get started, today's video sponsor is myself. Are you a dungeon master that has been frustrated by D&D mass combat rules? Well, worry no longer. I have a solution for you DMs. The squad combat module lets you run mass combat quickly with massive customization options. Do you like additional D&D supplements that improve the immersion and realism of your games? Want maps for your D&D adventures? Reduce your prep time, improve your games, and become a Patreon member today by clicking the link below in the description to join. And a big shout out to my Patreons that make these possible. Okay, so let's start out with a very simple thing. Okay, so castles. Castles. I'm going to turn off the grid here. You need to have a ditch, right? By the way, this is on my Patreon. If I didn't make that clear enough, whole map with everything. But you need a ditch. Okay, so a ditch is basically just a big piece of dug up earth about 5 feet, where you can make it whatever thing around the perimeter of the castle. Okay, you can do it with a moat. Okay, that is also another term. You can do a moat or a ditch. Okay, that's what this whole outer perimeter is right here. Okay, now it depends on where you are specifically in which location. Okay, because that is where a castle location comes into play. Okay, so if we back up a little bit, wherever your castle is going to be very important to where it should be, like where you're going to put it. Okay, if you want a very defensible castle, mountains or hills are very good. Okay, but it depends on the location that you're going to put a castle in. And I'm going to go show you this now. Okay, so if we take a look at an example. Okay, so this is where the castle is. I'm showing you, right? You can see that it is going to be on a cliffside right here, and it is going to be very highly defendable. Okay, the attackers are not going to be able to scale the cliff sides, not in any haste. They'd have to set it up to get up here, right? This makes the castle very defensible. So that's your first thing: is find a place to put a castle that makes actual sense, right? On either an important location that needs to be held, or a very defensive location that also, needs to be held, right? So the reason the castle's on the cliff is very defensible. You can see that there's wood walls on each side of these that an enemy can pierce through. Okay, once they pierce through it, you have basically it's going to buy you time. All these walls do is buy you time. Everyone evacuates to this castle because it's very defensive. And now, if the attackers come in, they have to go through a ditch, right? And they can't scale the cliffside. That would be a actual siege they would have to go through. Okay, but that's what the ditch is going to stop. Okay, once everyone is across a drawbridge, which is the next element, if you have a drawbridge or some type of bridge that retracts, or you could even have a bridge that breaks off and goes into the ditch. Either of these things work, okay? If you have a bridge, so let's say this one is a drawbridge, it comes up, okay? Now, what do the attackers have to do, okay? The attackers now have a plane with a ditch, okay? And there is no way into the actual castle, okay? Because this other side right here is again elevated. So if an attacker jumps down here, they're in a ditch, okay? And if it's a big ditch, let's say a 10-foot ditch or whatever, they can't physically climb out of it, okay? Which is very helpful in defending, okay? Because they can't climb out here, right? And then scale the walls. They can't do it because it's a 10-foot ditch. So now the defenders basically are oofed. There's not really a way for an attacker to prosecute this target unless they have siege machinery, okay? There are 2 ways to bypass a ditch or to get around it. There are probably more, but first is to fill it. Okay, that's going to take time. Okay, it's going to create casualties, or unless they have some type of weird magic that they could possibly do, but that's not really going to be a thing, right? Because you'll be able to shoot them this entire time. Okay, but to get past a ditch, the first step would be to set up basically basically a whole bunch of arrow traps, or not arrow trap. Basically, think of a big shield with like wood. Okay, just big things that troops can hide behind. Okay, and all it's doing is stopping the arrows from hitting them. Okay, so they're gonna move these little like barricades up to here, put dirt in, retreat. or they'll keep them here and they'll just build a whole long line of them. Okay, just a whole long line of them, and they'll basically just fill the ditch. Okay, that's basically option number one, and that's how you clear a ditch. Okay, um, that's your really option there because you're not going to be able to get a ram or anything else to the walls successfully because you need flat ground. Okay, um, you could do a dig mining underneath a castle, but that's a bit more complex, and I'll probably make a video on actual how you would siege a castle. But this is just the castle design. Okay, but basically you understand why you need a ditch. Ditch buys you time. Ditch buys you the ability to not be immediately attacked once the attackers get there. Okay, so build a ditch around your castle wherever you go. Doesn't matter. Get rid of the stupid movie bullshit. Okay, all castles, most castles that are have half good design have a ditch or a moat around them to stop attackers from immediately attacking the castle. It slows them down. So drawbridge comes up. Okay, drawbridge is now up. 10-foot ditch. Okay, now there's a portcullis. Okay, now the reason the portcullis is there in this gatehouse is for the fact that it's going to be an extra layer of defense. Okay, so let's just say for whatever reason they weren't able to get the bridge up. Attackers somehow get across this bridge. They have to get through a portcullis, okay, which is this door, right? And they have to break through that gate, the portcullis, and then they have to break through a second one, okay, to break through onto the other side, okay? Now, what can happen here is if we go to the second layer of the tower, you can see that you can shoot, the defenders have the ability to shoot down into this portcullis, right, and throw stones down there, which basically makes it a very good death trap for any attacker that have to go through one or two, okay? And if we go back down a level, you can see that this platform is going to be elevated above where the portcullis is, so that there could be archers here shooting them down into here, okay? Basically, you make this thing a killing field for all intents and purposes. And the reason you do this is to basically make the attackers bloodied as possible. That's the whole reason for this gatehouse design, okay? You can make even more elaborate gatehouse design, but this is a very simple one that gives you the ability to decimate attacking forces, okay? Because you're fighting on the high ground here, right, and shooting down, and then you're also fighting even higher up here, shooting down into the portcullises, and then shooting out from these tower positions, okay? So that's the gatehouse, right? And that's why the gatehouse is designed this way, okay? So now that that design element is out of the way, you can see that we'll back it up a little bit. So after these two portcullises, you have this little rope thing, okay? The little rope thing is for this bridge, okay? And then you can see right here that these gatehouse winches are for the actual portcullises. So they're protected. They're all protected behind the first layer, the second layer of defense, right? The first layer of defense is the drawbridge. Now, you can see that there is different ways to get to this second tier, okay? Now, there's no way for you to get to the second tier, right, from this little portcullis area. Why is that? Very simple. If an attacker can get to you, that's bad, okay? That's why these things are like 7 feet tall, right, and they're unscalable, right? They're just a stone face. That's why you have to go past the second portcullis and up these stairs to this door to this elevated platform, okay, which allows you to shoot down, and the attackers that are going to be in this kill zone, they can't do anything but basically sit there and try to snipe you with return fire, okay? There's also ladders back here. These ladders go up to the second floor, okay? And again, your second floor has visibility to shoot out in every direction and shoot down into these little portcullis areas, okay? And it's, again, higher than where the attackers are. Now, that is why the gatehouse design is like that. And hopefully you understand why it is like that, to make it basically a kill zone, okay? And make it very easy for the defenders to kill the attackers and the attackers to do very little damage to the defenders, okay? If the attackers somehow either get across this bridge, break the first portcullis, and break the second portcullis, they are now inside the keep, okay? Now, this is a problem. This castle design right here is more of it's not a very well fortified castle, if that makes sense. So you could have successive multiple gatehouses. You could have this be the first one and then have a second one, okay? You could also have this be a first gatehouse and then a wall down here and then have another battlement with another gatehouse and do a second thing, okay? But that's getting into very, very eloquent and fortified castle design, which I could go over in a different video if I ever make a bigger castle than this, okay? But just for example, one gatehouse with a kill zone should be sufficient in most cases, okay? Now, going to see this little stone wall out here. Stone wall that goes around the entire castle, right? Basically, it is just a wall with battlements. Okay, these battlements here are for you as the defender to sidestep, shoot, and take cover behind. Okay, that's the reason they are there. You could again make them more elaborate if you wanted to. Okay, but this is a very simple design that you can get done very quickly. Okay, if I ever make another castle, I may make them a double wall where you can step in and shoot out. You probably could get matriculations in here. Matriculations are basically if you have a wall, matriculations are the things that are down, so you can shoot down into them. Okay, but for intents purposes, this wall is not that high, right? But it is on elevated ground from the dirt down here, from the ditch. Okay, so remember, they can't jump this ditch basically, and they fall into the ditch, make it 10, 15 feet deep. They can't climb out of it, right? And if they climb up here, right, they have to get over a wall that's whatever 10 foot high or whatever on elevated ground or 5 foot, whatever you want to make it. Okay, which makes it pretty hard to get through. Okay, as you can see, there is no outer tower areas, and that's because my players haven't built any outer towers. Okay, down here would be a tower, for example. Okay, if you want to have a better defended area, which is what this is, right? So this is a lookout post. You have a tower here. Basically, it's very simple. There's gear here. You go up the stairs. Okay, once you go up the second floor, you're going to come up here to a ballista, and you're going to have wood coverings here. You could again fortify this even more with wood battlements to extend. That would be extending outside of the tower. That basically people can walk in and shoot down. But for this purpose, it basically serves the purpose of an artillery position that shoots down that can see over the own walls and shoot in basically multiple directions with the ballista. Okay, that's what your tower should do. And this is a very basic tower. You can make them even more elaborate with different levels and different doors and how their ammunition system would work. But basically, for example, this is just manual ammo is dragged up to the top. It's very simple. Okay, and that's that. As you can see, we have a barn here because castles are quote unquote supposed to be places you live in. They're not really fortifications in the traditional sense. Okay, they are basically fortified residences for most parts. If you start going past the 1500s to 1600s, you start changing that a little bit to actual fortified positions. You could even, if you go back to the 14 and 1500s, there are specific castles that were for defense only, but they were rare. They were more rare than you think. So just remember that if your castle, probably a living area. And in this case, it's a living area. I've gone over this thing in my player base design, so I won't go over it here, but basically you have a living area here. You have bathhouses. Okay, you have bathhouses and toilets that are separate because you don't want to get dysentery. And if you're in D&D, they probably know to not mix water and poo-poo water. Okay, it is very important to keep yourself disease free in a siege because that is the number one factor in determining whether your siege is going to be you're either going to last a siege or you're not. Okay, if disease, it's food and disease. Okay, you could food and disease. Number 1 and 2. If you run out of food, you're going to starve to death and you're going to die from disease. And number 2, if disease gets bad, doesn't matter how much food you have, you're all dying from disease, ends the siege. Okay? So those are the 2 things you need to focus on. So I have focused on this, and I have a little barn area for horses. Okay? Now, we have a little storage area out here. Storage area is always good in a castle in case you want to keep additional armor for the citizens that are going to be in the town, right? So as you can see, these town people would come to this castle, and you could arm them up. Because citizens do something in the sieges, unlike portrayed in movies and stuff. They would fight because it is their home and they don't want to die. So that is why a little storage area is down there. Okay. So if we go to the basement down here in the actual, I would call this a keep, quote unquote, but not really. It's kind of a keep, you could say. If you go down to the basement, again, you could put even more storage stuff down here. Right here's an additional ballista, a little smithing place, grind wheels, additional shields, armor, and basically all additional supplies, okay, for your ability to last a siege. I would recommend you do this so you can store whatever we want down here, okay? If you go back up to the ground floor and go up the staircase, you will see that the second tier is basically just a war room, book room, lounge room, whatever you want to call it, and more rooms for soldiers, okay? Third floor is the exact same, more room for soldiers, right? And the fourth floor is basically just roofs, okay? Now, an important thing about the roofs, if you take a look, right, You can get on the roofs and shoot down even more if you wanted to risk it, okay? Because the roofs are sloped in this particular way. If you wanted to, I'm not saying I would recommend it, but hey, desperate times, desperate measures, you can start fortifying the size of these roofs, and then you'll be able to basically think of it like a 45-degree slant, right? So if you're slanted this side and you're standing over here, you're impervious from fire over on this general direction, okay? If you step up and over, you can shoot them and then duck back down, okay? Again, it's going to depend highly on whether you want to do this, how good your guys' training is, and what your roofs are made out of. In this case, they're made out of wood, so they're, burnable. They're not made out of stone. So that's your thing you can do there, okay? But that's just basic overview of castle design. I hope it was helpful for your D&D things. Leave some questions down below if you have any questions about some basic castle design principles. Otherwise, I shall see you people next time.